Welcome back. You're watching Hard Copy, coming to you from our studios in Abuja. Professor Chidi Odinkalu is our guest tonight, and we're speaking specifically on solutions to the farmers-herders conflict.
Journalism is also, can help bring solutions, or in many instances can help exacerbate the conflict. This is where you wanted me to see two articles when I invited you for this interview. One was by Olatunji Dare, Those Rampaging Herders, was the article he wrote in the Nation, and the other by Mahmoud Jaga, titled Sin Without the Herdsmen. Now, how would you say that opinion shapers have contributed to the conflict or helped to solve the conflict?
It's not the business of opinion shapers to solve conflicts. What you don't want to do as an opinion shaper is to be intellectually dishonest. So you've got to maintain factual accuracy. Within the framework of factual accuracy, you can choose what you do. But I don't think, in the midst of all of these things, what I find bothersome is government, which has primary responsibility for this, has focused on two things: asking mostly the victims to be accommodating, and asking journalists to suppress stories. I think that's wrong. I think that really dramatizes how tone deaf and emotionally deaf.
You think that's what he meant when you were saying, we should take it easy, as it were?
What are you going to do? Not report facts?
Report the stories.
What are you going to do? Not report. I can understand, of course. Professional judgment means you don't want to dishonor dead bodies. So there are things you don't do in reporting the stories, like publish pictures of gory remains of human beings. I think that's not acceptable. But are you going to say you're not going to report the facts just because government says so, or because the facts are distasteful? Because if you don't report the facts, government is going to suppress the facts, and those victims are not going to be heard of. And we're talking about a country in which lots of people are born without being recorded, they live without records, and they die without records. And the only story ever told of these victims, in most cases, is the story told by the journalists. Nobody, when we are killed as Nigerians in these things, nobody gives us names. We are numbers. Oh, we are quantities. In Zaria Massacre, 347 is what we remember, the number of people whose remains were poured into graves. In Benue, 73 is what we remember, the number of people buried in one day. In Lao, what do we remember? 52. In places like Numan, we don't even have numbers. That is how bad it is. Okay? And we've got government that does not even care to humanize its dead citizens, telling journalists, don't write these stories because they are not palatable. Well, that's not part of your brief, I'm sorry.
Is that how you read it?
That's exactly how I read it. I may well be wrong, but that's how I read it.
Well, some people have called for restructuring in the wake of this. I mean, there's some other, more balanced, as it were, between the two extreme articles, which you wanted me to read. But, let me take the article from Olusegun Adeniyi, for instance. He says... Today? Yeah, today. Let me say Thursday, the 18th of January.
Yes.
Now, the title is When a Nation Becomes a Funeral Home.
Yeah.
He believes that most of all that has happened is because no one has ever been brought to book over the killings, and from either side of the divide. And he also believes that restructuring does not affect this particular issue. Some Nigerians believe that that's the way to go. Do you see any link between that and the current conflict?
I don't necessarily see the link between this issue and restructuring, no. And by the way, the issues, the power levers for dealing with this, apart from the safety security one, which is unlikely to be largely in any way affected by restructuring, are controlled by states. The biggest single issue here in relation to how we are managed is land use and land management and allocation. That is that is under the Land Use Act, which is entrenched and doubly entrenched in the Constitution. That is handled by state governors. So I don't think we have a problem with that as such. I'm not too bothered about linking this, therefore, to restructuring. No, if that is the question.
If you talk about land use, then how do you how do you expect state governors to deal with this seeming resistance to ranching as a suggestion?
They can't deal with it. They don't have the political space. The only way they can get the political space is if the federal government is seen as more even-handed. this is not a question of who is right or who is wrong, mind you. The fact is, if you go to any of the places affected, particularly in the Middle Belt, and I would stretch the Middle Belt, I would stretch that to from Kwara to Adamawa, which is in the northeast, include Taraba, which is in the northeast. If you go to any of these places, the likelihood is that people are going to tell you there's no way. If any governor tries it, they are out.
By no way, what do you mean?
They will not accept the designation of any lands for this purpose. And
that's cattle colonies, you mean?
Absolutely, yes.
Yes, I understand that, but I mean, we've seen situations where state governors are saying, well, we want ranching. We want people to...
They will not get any land for it. And you see, in the Middle Belt at the moment, there isn't, of the 52 gazetted the 50 grazing reserves in the country, only 5 are in the Middle Belt. You've got 1 in Kwara, you've got 1 in Niger, you've got 3 in the old Plateau-Nasarawa axis. 1 in Plateau and 2 in Nasarawa. That's 5. That's it.
So the herdsmen are in a quandary.
Absolutely. And this is where you need this to happen. And how is this going to happen? The presidency has got to be seen to be behaving in such a way that it gives the governors elbow room. Now, mind you, people are sitting down and calculating. President is from Northwest. All his security cabinet is where? Around his neighborhood. Yes? Now, who are the people doing this? People who are supposed to be the president's people, according to the narrative. I'm not saying, okay? This is where the mindsets are framed, or the way the mindsets are framed. And now, you are telling them, bring your land. So people are calculating, they have the presidency, they have security, right? They are killing us. Now you want us to give them our land over our dead bodies. That is the way this is done. How do you change this? By engaging them. Who is going to engage them? It's not going to be the governors, because the governors are in a very precarious position. It is the president who is going to have to go to these people and behave differently. He's unwilling to do it.
So where are we going to be left? If you perceive that the president is unwilling to do it, because the narrative we might get tomorrow might be that that is very different. That maybe, indeed, he's looking for another solution.
Well, this thing is not rocket science. We're all Nigerians. The president is not looking for any other solution. I'm sorry, with all due respect. There is no magic solution to this. The only solution is you've got to dialogue with these communities and move them along, as painful as that is. Move them along to a point where they're willing to listen to an informed conversation on this. At the moment, there is no window for an informed conversation.
But I'm just wondering, how are you so sure that the communities are not willing to also give land for ranching?
I've actually traveled around these communities. I've engaged with Southern Kaduna since 1992. A lot of the people who are here killed are people with whom I've worked. And so at the personal level, there's a sense of very personal loss, which only deepens my personal involvement. And so these are people with whom I'm talking on a daily basis, and with whom I relate as extended family. And what I telegraph here is partly what I hear. There is not any whiff of possibility that land will be voluntarily surrendered right now. The political window does not exist. And if you do it by coercion, you escalate the problems.
Because the state governors have the power. If they have control over the land, recall that one of the reasons why the National Assembly could not legislate over grazing reserves was because they do not have, the federal government does not have powers over that. It's on a residual list.
It is in the Land Use Act, and you've got to take it away from the Land Use Act. And to amend the Land Use Act, you've got to go to Section 315 of the Constitution.
So can we say then that the governors really do not have any powers over given land or earmarking land for cattle colonies?
They do,
or
but
grazing
they
reserves
don't have
or ranches.
the political space. You see, in a democracy, this is not a military government, with all due respect. Although our president is a general, retired. This is a democracy, and there are political consequences. In a democracy, you don't dispense coercion, you dispense authority. You earn authority from serving the interests of your people. When you go against the interests of your authority, or of your people, your authority is spent up. And at that point, you either pay a political price or you become authoritarian. There is no other way to it. Right now, they don't have political capital to spend on this.
Well, interesting proposal. We'll see how that goes. But Professor Odinkalu, it's always very lovely to have you here on Hard Copy.
Thanks for having me. And congratulations again.
Thank you.
That's the program tonight, but just before we go, let's take a look at some of your feedback from last week's program. Now, Joseph Oladele says, "Good day, Maokwe. I'm not comfortable with some of the statements of Ms. Additional regarding the attitude of Nigerian negativity to the government. I'm highly surprised by the choice of words. We overwhelmingly voted for the APC because we needed good governance, not killings here and there. As the killer in Omoko has been revealed, so must those doing the killings in Benue be brought to justice." And Emmanuel Aguma, Attorney General and Commissioner of Justice in Rivers, writes, "Maokwe, Happy New Year. I think Mr. Femi Additional does hold Nigerians in contempt. What silver lining is there at fuel queues when no refinery in Nigeria is working? What silver lining is there when we buy fuel at 220 naira per litre? Honestly, I believe he and his payments, they would also be shocked that they cannot rig themselves back to power in 2019. The propaganda has failed, just as they have failed on deliverables." Well, what can we say? 2018 is going to be a year of great politicking ahead of 2019, and we hope to keep it frank here on Hard Copy. So send your mails and messages to us on the handles showing on your screen. Thank you for watching tonight. I'm Maokwe Ogunyusa.